The rope ran out over 40 feet of white water, and a small sealed pouch was riding it under her father's block, swaying, clear of the flood by less than the length of a man's arm. A man was going to hang at 8 o'clock that morning, 6 miles away, and everything in the world that could save him was riding on that rope. Emeline Braithwaite stood on the mere bank with both hands on that rope, and her weight thrown back against it, boots sunk to the ankle in mud, and she did not look at the pack. She looked at the far bank, where a duke stood knee-deep in the brown roar of the beck with the hauling tail of the line dragged hard against his chest, holding steady, holding everything. Below the rope, loose and light and unladen, 7 ponies came through the shallows in a line, and the first light of morning was breaking gold through the last of the storm. 6 miles, 8 o'clock, and a duke in the water, doing exactly as he was told. They had come to this hour the hard way, and it had begun the afternoon before, in her own yard, with a stranger's horse blowing white froth at her gate. The horse was done. Emeline saw that before she saw the rider, a big bay hunter, ridden out, head down to its knees, sides heaving. Whoever had used a horse like that had either no sense or no choice. Then the rider came off its back and took his hat off to her. She saw the mud on a coat that had cost more than her string, and she knew his face. Everyone in that county knew his face. He was 42. "You are Miss Braithwaite," said Kenelm, Duke of Harefold, "the carrier." "I am." She did not curtsy. Her hands were full of Moppet's gall pad, and besides, she did not feel like it. "And you are the man who signed my brother over to the assizes and my route contract with him. The king's bags go the valley road now." He did not flinch, and she gave him that much. He stood in her yard in his ruined boots and took it. "Yes," he said, "I am, Miss Braithwaite. The bridge at Carsbridge went into the river last night. The whole valley road is under water. I have been told there is no way north to Skelbeck, where they have him, before tomorrow noon, no way for a coach, no way for a rider who does not know the high country. I was told one person might cross it in the dark." He was breathing nearly as hard as his horse. They said, "Ask for Braithwaite's string." "Zachary hangs Monday," she said. Her voice came out flat and strange to her own ears. "At 8 in the morning. You want to reach Skelbeck before 8, and it is past noon on Sunday now. Why?" And the Duke of Harefold, who had all the power in that county and none at all in her yard, opened his coat and showed her a wax-cloth wallet, and said the thing that broke the day in half. "Because I carry his pardon, and I cannot get it there." The yard went very quiet. A hen was scratching somewhere behind the stable. Emeline heard her own heart, and the beck at the field's foot running too high, and nothing else at all. "Say that again," she said, slowly. "Your brother is not to die." He said it slowly, as she had asked, and laid it down carefully. "The man who robbed the Skelbeck mail has confessed. His confession is in this packet. The Queen herself wrote for Zachary. Her letters went into the Regent, and the free pardon was signed at Carlton House on Friday evening. Friday evening, Miss Braithwaite. Do you understand me? It could not have come sooner, and now the roads are gone, and it can come no further. There is one paper, Miss Braithwaite, and one only in England. Every post that could carry a second is under the flood. The paper that stops the hanging is in my coat, and every man in Carsbridge tells me the only road left in this county is yours." Emeline put out one hand and steadied herself on Moppet's warm neck, and the pony bore it, as ponies do. Her other hand she kept at her side, fist closed, nails in the palm, the only way she knew to stand upright. She wanted to sit down in the mud of her own yard and cry. She did not. She was 31, her father's daughter, and there were 16 hours of dark country between this yard and her brother's life, and crying would not shorten them by a step. "The tops," she said. 26 miles over the long moss, the bog, at night, in the thaw. That is what you are asking me for, whether you know it or not. Can it be done? It has never been done in March. She looked at the sky and at the light, and did the sums her father had taught her. Then she looked at the Duke. It can be done if nothing is wasted. Not an hour, not a pony, not a word. We go at 3:30, and we go my way, my road, my string, my say, and where I lead, you follow. All of it or none. All of it, said the Duke. He did not bargain. His voice was low and worn through. And your fee? You will not like my fee. Name it anyway. Your name under my petition for the moor mail, said Emeline, in your own hand. And the post office told plainly why the Braithwaite name lost that contract. And my brother home. She lifted her chin. That is the whole of it. Now put that poor horse in my stable, your grace, because you are done killing it, and help me load. The yard at Ewesley filled with afternoon light and moving bodies. Emeline worked through all of it without one wasted turn. 7 ponies came out of the stable in their order. Their order was not an accident. Mallow first, the lead mare, Pete Black, 14 hands of opinion, with a small white star and 1 white coronet, who had walked the moor road since before she was backed, and knew it better than most men knew their own stairs. Then Gimlet, the steadiest, who carried the 2 sealed panniers. Then Moppet, the youngest, with 2 light ones. Then the Brown sisters, who did everything together or not at all, with 2 apiece. Last came the 2 dark geldings, Ash and Soot. 8 side packs went on in all, hung in pairs, 2 to a pony. Soot carried nothing, and came anyway. A spare pony is not an empty place. It is the answer to the thing the road has not done yet. The Duke stood holding pack frames he did not understand. To his credit, he held them where he was told. Load high and even, Emeline said, working the wanty tight under Gimlet's belly, the band that holds a pack frame down. A pack that sits crooked at the gate is a pack that turns at midnight, and a turned pack on a bog is a dead pony. So we do it right here, in the light, where it is easy. She looked at him over the pony's back. That is the first law of this road, your grace. Everything that kills you on the tops was done wrong in the yard. And 1 horse is a wager, your grace. A string is a road. The lead finds it. The loads are shared, and when one goes down, the others bring it out. Then teach me the yard, said the Duke, and rolled up his sleeves. The Duke of Harefold stood coatless in a carrier's yard, learning to fold a canvas square-cornered while a fat hen watched him work. At 2 o'clock, the Carsbridge postmaster came up the lane on a borrowed cob, with the flood mud still on him and 2 mailbags across his saddlebow. What he did in her yard mattered more than she had words for. He set the bags down. Then he took out his book and his seal, and wrote her authority into it where she stood. Emeline Braithwaite of Ewesley is entrusted with the carriage of His Majesty's mail, Carsbridge to Skelbeck over the moor road, this night, by me, Deputy of the Postmaster General. He read it out as he wrote it, hoarse from a day of shouting across water, then sealed a fair copy and put it in her hand. The bags ride under your charge and my seal, and the law rides with them. It is written now, lass, and writing out lasts talk. He shook her hand then, hard, an old man's grip with 30 years of weather in it. Your father's hand had that same hold on it, he said. I am glad it is you. Her throat closed. She let it for the length of 1 breath. Then she put the sealed bags on Gimlet, high and even. The waxcloth wallet with the Queen's letters went into a small oilskin express pouch. The postmaster sealed the throat of it and entered it in his book apart, under its own hour and number. Emeline signed for it and stowed it in Gimlet's near pannier herself. The Duke carried the receipt and a commission naming him her substitute if she could not come in. She felt the weight of the kingdom's post settle onto her little string. It felt like her father's coat around her shoulders. The last thing she took was small. No one saw her take it. On a nail by the stable door hung a hazel stick, notched all down one side, grey with a year of weather. She stood in front of it a moment, her hand half raised. She breathed in, once, the breath she took before a hard crossing. Then she took it down and put it in her breast pocket, where a folded paper already lay. She buttoned the pocket and said nothing at all about any of it. "Your horse stays here," she told the Duke, and led Ash out of the line, saddled with nothing but a riding pad. "You ride him. He is a pack pony, and he will follow the string whatever you do, so do nothing. On this road, Your Grace, you are cargo." He looked at the little pony, and at his own long legs. Something crossed his face that had nothing to do with the pony. Then he swung up onto the pad, knees high, hands quiet, and said, "Cargo, very well. One thing more." She came and stood at his stirrup. There was no stirrup, which made it easier. She looked up at him plainly. "You will hear no bells on my string. My father cut the bells off in the year 9. Every other string in the north rings so folk can hear it coming, but on the tops, in the thaw, you keep your ears for the water. If you hear water where water should not be, you sing out. That is your whole work tonight. Listen for water," said the Duke. "On my honour." "Honour is for the flat country," said Emeline, and went to Mallow's Head. "Up here we just do not drown." At 3:30 in good light, the string of Ewesley went out through the yard gate. Mallow leading, loads even, 7 ponies and 2 riders, and the King's mail and the Queen's letters and 1 man's life. It moved off up the lane the way her father had taught it to move. Like one animal, no bells. The Duke rode last, in the middle of it and belonging to it. Emeline Braithwaite set her face to the north and the rising ground, and gave her heart about half a second to be afraid. They had 16 hours to do 26 miles in, and 8 o'clock waited at the end of them. "Walk on," she said, and the road began. The first water came an hour out, while the light still held. The low ford at the Beckfoot was a crossing Emeline had made 1,000 times, and she had never once made it the same way twice, because the water was never the same water. Today it ran 2 hands higher than yesterday, the colour of strong tea, and it carried the thaw in it. She could hear the stones knocking along the bottom, a dull undersound under everything. That sound was the moor talking, and what it said was that everything above you was coming down. She halted the string on the gravel and read the crossing. "We go up 20 yards, she said. "The straight way is deeper than it looks. See where the water lies smooth. Smooth is deep, broken is shallow. You want the water quarrelling round your feet, not being polite." She turned Mallow upstream, and we cross with our faces half into the current, never straight over. A pony pushed sideways on is a pony swimming, and nobody swims tonight. She sent Mallow in first and riderless to walk the ford and mark it, the mare reading the bottom with each forefoot before she trusted it, and the string went after her on that line, 7 noses in a row breaking the brown water. The Duke went where the string went, wet to the knee and silent as instructed. Emeline came last, and came on foot, in the water at the loads where she could watch every one of them. Midway across, Moppet checked and stood. The youngest pony stood with the water piling at her belly, and shivered. Emeline was up the line before the Duke had finished drawing breath to ask what was wrong, hand over hand along wet manes, and got to Moppet's head, and did not pull her. She walked her 3 steps out of the run, into the gravel shallows. "There then," she said, in the voice she kept for the young ones, the voice like a banked fire. "There, nobody hurries you. Look at me instead of the water. It is only the gall, is it not? The pad has slipped and it pinches, and the cold makes it worse. I know. I know." And standing in the shallows with the water round her boots, with 16 hours and a man's life on her back, Emeline Braithwaite spent 4 minutes she could not spare unbuckling a pack, refolding a gall pad, setting it back so it lay soft over the sore place. The pony turned her head and leaned it, all of it, into Emeline's chest. Just leaned, the way a child leans, her weight of trust given over, and stood so while the buckle was drawn. She took the weight, and her boots slid an inch in the beck bottom. She held because her father had held, and she had learned it off him. The Duke watched this from the far bank. He felt ashamed, and he felt something open in his chest, both at once. He had sat on committees. He had heard men sworn and heard men lie. He had grown used to the idea that trust was mostly a performance, and a poor one, and here was a pony that could not be lied to, in the middle of cold water, leaning her head on a woman as if the woman were a wall that had never fallen on anyone. Ponies do not lean on liars. He understood, watching, that he had crossed more than a beck. "Walk on," said Emeline, and Moppet walked on, easy now. The string came up the far bank, streaming and blowing, and stood to be counted. 7. Emeline counted them aloud, every crossing, every halt, her father's rule. You count them out loud so that the knight cannot argue with you later. 4 minutes, she said to no one in particular, wringing the beck out of her skirts. We take it back on the top road. You could have left the pad till the far bank, the Duke said. He was not accusing, he was asking. A man honestly trying to learn the arithmetic. I could. She swung up onto Mallow on the dry bank, and she would have crossed hurting and remembered it. Next water she would refuse, and that refusal would cost me half an hour at 3 in the morning on the long moss, where half an hour is a life. Kindness is not soft, your grace. On this road, kindness is the fastest thing there is. He was quiet a while, riding. Then, my whole life, he said, I have been told a thing may be kind or it may be sound, and a man must choose. You have been told wrong by comfortable people, said Emeline. Now stop talking and listen for water. Behind them, the low country was closing in shadow. Ahead, the ground rose and went on rising, and the last daylight lay burning off along the tops. The first of the true moor wind came down to meet them, cold and smelling of 1,000 acres of wet peat. 23 miles. The dark coming. The string climbed. Full dark had come down by the time the string dropped into Swinner Gill, and the bait house stood in the bottom of it with one window burning, the way it had stood and burned for 80 years of carriers. To bait is to stop and feed, and a bait house is where a string does it. Mrs. Holroyd was out of her door before the first hoof rang on the cobbles, holding a lantern high, and what she said was what she had said to Braithwaites for 30 years. How many and how wet? 7 and 2, called Emeline, and wet through. Then get in, the lot of you. The old woman's eye found the Duke, took the measure of his coat and his pad pony in one pass, and moved on unimpressed. Him and oar, stews on. The bait house rule was 2 hours. Emeline gave the order at the door, loads off, every pony rubbed dry, fed, and stood easy. The Duke, who by now asked no questions when her voice went flat, carried packs until his arms shook. But there was a clock in his face, and the old woman saw it plain. You are grudging the 2 hours, sir, she said, ladling stew. Say it. You are sitting there doing sums, and every sum says ride. A man dies at 8, said the Duke. Every hour we sit is an hour the ponies eat, and every hour the ponies eat is 3 miles they give back on the tops, said Mrs. Holroyd, with the finality of scripture. Tom Braithwaite's law, and it never failed him. Rest is speed, sir. Anybody can hurry. Hurrying is what killed your horse. She thumped the bowl down in front of him. Eat your supper. He ate his supper. The Duke of Harefold, who had dined with the regent, ate mutton stew at a scrubbed deal table between a carrier and a stable boy, and had never in his life been gladder of a meal. The stable boy was a scrap of a lad who did the night work for his keep, and Emeline, without appearing to notice she did it, slid half her own plate onto his. Mrs. Holroyd saw. Mrs. Holroyd saw everything. She said nothing, but she cut the seed cake, the whole cake, and wrapped a great slice of it in paper and pushed it into the Duke's hands. For the moss, sir. You will want something in your hand at 3 o'clock. Everybody wants something in their hand at 3 o'clock. She looked at him a moment, kinder. Even her father did. The Duke turned the warm parcel over. You knew him well, her father. 30 years of his suppers. The old woman sat down heavily across from him, and her eyes went to the door Emeline had gone through to see the ponies. Tom Braithwaite, big quiet man. He carried this road when nobody else would touch it in winter, because the high villagers needed their letters, same as anybody, he said. A wedding is a wedding, he said, and bad news kept is worse news, and folk are owed their own lives by post, same as lords. She smoothed the tablecloth with one cracked thumb. In the January thaw, a year gone, the stake line on the long moss wanted renewing. The old marks rot, see, and a rotted mark is a lie standing up in a bog. He had it in mind to renew the line entire that winter, 40-odd posts, and went up alone to make a start. Weather turned. They found him 2 days after, up on the moss, dry on his own trodden ground, and the tally of it still in his coat pocket. She looked up. She has kept it safe since, stake by stake. But a new line entire wants paying for, and no root money has come into that yard since they took the lad. Cold took him, quiet, at his own trade. There are worse ends. But she was down here waiting his supper when the word came, and I will not tell you what that night was. It is hers, not mine. The Duke sat very still. In his coat, against his chest, lay the letters that were one man's life, and he understood now that in her breast pocket, against her own chest, rode a notched hazel stick that was another man's life. He had wondered why she would not give the mail-bags up even to be dried. He did not wonder any longer. She has not spoken of him, he said. Not once. Nor will she, till the work's done. That is how that family grieves. They finish the round first. Mrs. Holroyd stood gathering bowls. You mind her on the moss, sir, not because she is weak, because she is up there every time with him, and she goes anyway. Nobody should carry that and the King's mail both with no one to see the cost of it. When Emeline came in from the stable, her hands were raw red with cold and cracked along the knuckles. She tried to make a fist to warm them, and the cracks opened. Her own hands had betrayed her in front of him. And it was the Duke who moved first. He took the salve pot from the mantel where any bait house keeps it, and, before she could refuse, before he could think better, took her 2 hands and dressed them, there at the fire, working the salve over each split knuckle with a care that took a long time. Neither of them said one word. Her hands lay in his and stayed. She breathed out once, and the sound of it was small and unfamiliar, a thing let go. The fire ticked. Somewhere in the stable a pony sighed, contented, and Mrs. Holroyd, watching from the scullery door, smiled to herself the smile of an old woman who has kept him in on a hard road for a long lifetime. Emeline stood at 10 exactly, flexed her salved hands once, and said, "Load." 14 miles were left. The moss lay ahead of them in the dark. Above Swinner Gill, the road stopped pretending to be a road. It became a groove worn in the hill by 300 years of laden ponies, and the rain came back as sleet, small and hard, hissing off the packs. The lanterns made 2 swinging rooms of light in a blackness with no walls. They climbed an hour without speaking. Then the Duke spoke, because there are things that will only come out of a man in the dark. You asked me a question, he said, at the committal. Do you remember what you asked? I remember. Emeline's voice came back level from the dark ahead. I asked how a man robbed the North Mail at 6:30 at Skelbeck Bar, when the Ewesley carrier's book had him signing for a delivery in my own yard at 5, because I wrote the entry myself, and 14 miles of March Road lay between the two, and no horse in the county does 14 miles of that road in 90 minutes. That is what I asked, and I did not answer it. No, Your Grace. You said the identification was sworn and certain. You said the book was a sister's book and worth nothing, and you signed. The sleet hissed. The string climbed. When he spoke again, his voice had something in it she had not heard from him. Not sorrow exactly, but an inventory. A man counting his own actions honestly and out loud. 2 men swore to his face in bad light, and I believed them, because believing them was quick, and the assizes were sitting. I have signed a great many papers in my life and been told that my signature was sound. He rode a while. Your question would not leave. I want you to understand, it was not conscience at first, it was tidiness. A magistrate does not like an entry that will not reconcile. 14 miles in 90 minutes. I sat with it at my own table that night, and it would not reconcile, and one morning I understood that the thing that would not reconcile was me. So you went looking. I went looking. The Bow Street men found the true man before the week was out. He had robbed the Skelbeck mail with the same pistol he sold in London a week after. He confessed before a magistrate. I carried that confession to the Home Office myself, and I was told, and here his voice went flat, that the machinery does not hurry. The judge's report goes at the end of circuit. These things have their season, Your Grace. Your brother, Miss Braithwaite, had a season of 11 days. So the Queen, said Emeline slowly, was you. The Queen was 2 days in a corridor at the Queen's house, and a letter I am not proud of, and an old woman's mercy, said the Duke. Queen Charlotte cannot stop a hanging. No queen can. The law does not know her. But the regent minds his mother where he minds nothing else, and her letters went in on the Thursday, and on Friday evening at Carlton House, the regent granted a free pardon in the king's name, by warrant to the sheriff. The king's messenger rode express that night. I went after him before dawn on Saturday, and he overtook me at midnight at the last post town south of the water, and there his authority died with the road. A king's messenger cannot ride a road that is not there. Mine died in the same place. She heard him turn in the dark, and knew he was looking at her, or at where her lantern swung. So the paper came to the only hands going north. It is not mine by right, Miss Braithwaite. Nothing tonight is mine by right. I am one more parcel on your string, and I know it. Emeline rode a long time before she trusted her voice. Zachary, she said at last, just the name into the sleet. Zachary, said the Duke, careful with it, giving it back. 19 years old, wheelwright's apprentice. He asked after your ponies at the committal, did you know that? Before anything else. They had him in irons, and the first thing he asked was whether Moppet's gall had healed. A silence. I signed the paper anyway. I have thought about that every day since. A boy asks after a pony, and I was tidy, Miss Braithwaite. God forgive tidiness. She did not absolve him. He had not asked her to, and it was not hers to give. It was Zachary's if it was anyone's, and Zachary was 12 miles away in a stone cell listening to a scaffold being tested in the dark. But something in her chest shifted its load and settled. She felt it in her shoulders first, the dropping of a weight she had not known she braced against. You are not a parcel, she said. Parcels do not learn. You folded 4 canvases square by the end of the yard, and you have not spoken once when the string was working water. It was, from a Braithwaite on that road, roughly equivalent to a knighthood, and some part of him seemed to know it. Thank you, said the Duke, gravely through the sleet. Now be a parcel again, said Emeline. The ground changes in a mile, and your Grace, when we are up there, whatever you hear, whatever you think you see in the fog, your pony goes where the string goes, and you go where I go, and not one step wide. 11 miles remained. The long moss lay ahead, flat and black in the dark. It had been waiting for them since the yard gate. The long moss announced itself by silence. The wind that had harried them all the way up the climb simply stopped, and the fog stood up out of the peat to meet them, not drifting, standing, a grey wall with no other side. The lantern light went about 10 feet and then just gave up. Somewhere out in that flat, blind dark lay 2 miles of blanket bog that had been drowning travellers since before the Romans, and one thin thread of solid ground ran through it, staked out by 3 generations of Braithwaites. Emeline halted the string at the moss edge and got down, and stood a moment with her hand flat on Mallow's warm neck. If she was speaking to the mare, or to the moss, or to somebody else entirely, the fog kept it private. Then she went to work. She did not lead from the front. She walked at Mallow's head, but half a step behind it, and she let the mare find the line stake to stake. The old grey posts loomed up one at a time in the lantern glow, weathered and leaning but sound where they went down into the peat, and Mallow went from each to the next without once checking. What Emeline herself read was the string. She read it through her feet and her ears, all 7 of them at once, the way a weaver reads 40 threads without looking at one. "Lines bunching," she said quietly, and dropped back 3 ponies to where the Brown sisters had crowded up nose to tail. "Give her room. When they crowd, they are frightened, and when they are frightened, they step wide, and wide is wet." She spaced them by hand, a palm to a chest, a word to an ear. "Listen to the feet, Your Grace. Do you hear gimlet, that clean sucking clop, like a cork drawn? That is sound peat, trodden peat, the line's own ground. Now the wide step, and somewhere left of the line a hoof came down with a fat wet slap, like dough dropped on a table. That sound is the moss saying not here. A carrier steers more by ear than eye up here. Eyes lie in fog, feet never." The Duke, on his pad pony in the middle of the line, in a fog that had swallowed England entire, held his tongue and listened to hoofbeats until he could hear the difference himself. Cork from dough, safe from not. He would remember all his life the moment he first heard it, because it was the moment the moor stopped being chaos to him and became a language, and every word of the language was hers. Midway over, at the height of the crossing, with black flat nothing on every side, Emeline said, without stopping, in a voice with nothing in it at all, "The first 10 stakes from the south end are paler than the others. My father replaced them. The 11th is still the old grey one. You will see the change as we pass. Beside it is where they found him." A pause, 1 breath long, no longer. He finished 10. And that was all. The 10 pale stakes came and went in the lantern light. Then the old grey 11th stood a moment and fell away behind. Emeline Braithwaite walked on at her mare's shoulder and finished her father's crossing for the 400th time, carrying the mail. The Duke took off his hat in the fog, where no one could see it but the ponies. Some things a man does for his own account. Emeline did not turn, but she felt the check in the line behind her, the momentary parting of pony bodies, and knew. Then Moppet went in. 1 wide step, 1. The young pony spooked at a curlew getting up almost under her feet, but 2 hooves left of the trodden line, and the moss took her to the girth in the time it takes to say it. She screamed and began to fight, and the fight was digging her in. "Stand still." Emeline's voice cracked over the fog, and everything stopped. Pony, string, Duke, knight. Then, low and fast, "Your Grace." Off. To me, on the trodden ground, my footprints and no others. You were about to be useful. What followed took 11 minutes, and she gave the orders, in this order and no other. Packs off first, both sides, girth and all. Nothing comes out of a bog loaded, and the load is what drowns them. His hands and hers, wet leather, buckles blind with mud. Now her head. Hold her head, both hands. Keep her nostrils clear and stop her fighting. Talk to her, I do not care what. Parliament speeches, anything. A still pony waits, Your Grace. A fighting pony digs. And the Duke of Harefold knelt in the peat and held a shaking pony's head in his 2 hands and recited, God help him, the preamble of the Turnpike Act, in the voice his nurse had used on him 40 years before, while behind him the carrier built solid ground. She tramped a platform out of the line's own trodden peat, working back from her father's stakes, laid the 2 offside packs flat, worked the peat loose down each leg till the suction gave, folded a pack canvas into a wide breast and body sling, 2 hands broad and more, and passed it under the barrel behind the forelegs. Never the head, never the neck. You pull a head, you break a neck. And set the 2 dark geldings on the sling, because 2 quiet ponies pull steadier than 10 frightened men. Now, she comes out flat, on her side, back the way she walked in. Her own ground held her once. It will hold her again. Everything on this moss goes back the way it came, or it stays. A breath. Pull. The geldings leaned. The moss held and sucked and argued and gave. Moppet came out over the laid packs flat on her side like a boat launching backwards, legs black to the hip, eyes white. And then she was up, on the trodden line, shaking in all 4 legs, and the whole string closed up around her nose to tail, of itself, no order given. Emeline stood plastered black to the shoulder, getting her breath. The Duke looked at her across the pony he had held, hapless, filthy, his voice gone hoarse somewhere in the turnpike act. What he felt now had no shame in it at all. It was the plain awe of a man who has watched a master at the one trade that mattered on the whole dark surface of the earth that night. 11 minutes, said Emeline. Her hand went to her own wrist, bare, where her father's watch would have been, and dropped. We walk her warm before she carries so much as a bag. She went over her with her hands first, the breathing, each leg, the back, the girth line, and walked her 20 paces to watch the gait. Nothing was torn and nothing strained. What she had was a pony frightened and cold, and nothing worse. Her packs go on soot. That is what he came for. Your Grace, you are a foot to the north edge. She caught Moppet's eye and held it. And you, madam, where I step, nowhere else. Soot took the 2 packs without lifting his head. The string walked on, and the fog gave them up at last at the north edge, 1 pony unladen for the rest of the night, 1 Duke muddier, no lives owed. On the hard ground beyond he got up on ash again. Behind them the long moss lay flat and black and patient, keeping everyone it had ever taken, 1 name short of what it wanted. 9 miles left, and past 3 o'clock, and the worst of the ground behind them with the worst of the night still to come. The water they heard next was the wrong water. It came up out of the dark ahead of them a mile past the moss edge, not the busy quarrelling of a ford, but a deep, steady tearing sound. Emeline halted the string so fast the Duke's pony walked into the Brown sisters. That is the Skelbeck side, she said, listening with her whole body. The burn below Hag Slack, where the Clapper Bridge goes over. The thaw has burst something above it, and it is running full spate. She was quiet a moment, taking the measure of the sound. It will run down. The first rush should run down. A thaw burst is a bucket tipped, not a tap opened. But nothing of mine goes into that water while it sounds like that. How long? Said the Duke. An hour, perhaps a little more. She turned Mallow toward a black hump on the near dark. There is a shooting hut. We wait. A man is depending on us to arrive, said Emeline, and drowned mail arrives nowhere. This is the road too, Your Grace. Sometimes the road is standing still. But her hands unloading were not quite steady. Both of them saw it, and neither said so. The hut was stone, 1 room, a fireplace and a stack of dry heather roots left by the keepers, because you leave a hut as you would find it, for the next soul the weather catches. She had flint and steel striking before he had the door shut. In 10 minutes there was a fire, and 7 ponies steaming nose in under the lee wall outside, and 2 people alone in 1 small lit room in the middle of a black drowned world, with an hour to stand still in. It was, of course, past 3 o'clock. It was nearer 4. The Duke remembered the parcel all at once and produced it from inside his coat. Mrs. Holroyd's seed cake, warm yet from riding against him. Emeline laughed. It cracked out of her before she knew it was coming, the first laugh either of them had heard from either in 2 days of the worst days of their lives. It changed the hut and everything standing in it. She said 3 o'clock, said the Duke, breaking the slice in half. I am late. You are late because my moss delayed you. The excuse is allowed." She took her half. They ate Mrs. Holroyd's seed cake by the fire in their soaked clothes like two children hiding from a governess. For the length of that cake there was no scaffold in the world. It could not hold, of course. The fire ticked. The burn tore on outside, fractionally quieter every quarter hour. The room filled up with everything the road had been too busy for. She was aware of him all the time now, heat with a direction to it. He sat forward, elbows on knees, firelight on the wreck of his fine coat, and watched her wring the peat water out of her plate. The watching had a weight that she could feel across the bench. "Emeline," he said. Her name, the first time. His voice had gone somewhere low. "When this is over, whatever the morning is, there is something I mean to ask you." She went still. The fire mapped them both. "Then you will ask it after," she said. But she said it softly. She did not move away. The distance between them on that bench was suddenly the exact width of the thing neither of them was doing. His hand came up slowly, asking all the way. One knuckle just barely touched the line of her jaw, and rested there, a question with no words in it at all. The warmth of it, against her jaw still cold from the ride, made her eyes sting. She had not cried once since the word came. She let it rest. 1 heartbeat, 2. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to lean into that hand, and she wanted to. "No," she said, gently, clearly, her hand coming up to his wrist, not throwing it off, holding it away. Her hand was not steady. She made it steady by will alone. "Not tonight. Not while my brother stands under a rope. Kenelm." She felt the shape of it in her mouth, strange and plain. He had a name again, not his Grace, not Harefold, Kenelm, plain. No one had said his name aloud like that, without title, without armour on it, in longer than he could remember. The refusal and the maim together did to him what no kiss yet had. He minded the difference and waited for whatever came after it. "After then," he said, and turned his hand under hers, just enough to press her fingers once. "I hold you to nothing, but I am asking leave to hope, Emeline Braithwaite." Her fingers did not press back, but they did not pull away. "Hope is free," she said, and the ghost of the laugh came back around her mouth. "It is the only thing on this road that is. Now close your eyes. I will wake you when the burn changes. You will sleep. I will listen for the water." He was already up, folding his ruined coat into a pillow for her with perfect gravity. "You taught me the sound, on the moss, cork and dough. I have one useful skill on this road, madam, and I intend to stand my watch with it." She was asleep before she could argue, the night's weight coming down on her at once, one hand in her breast pocket over the tally and the folded note. The Duke of Harefold kept the fire small and his ears open. He watched the sleeping carrier, and the door and the dark, and thought about signatures, and mercy, and the sound of safe ground. Outside, exactly as she had promised, the flood ran itself quiet, a little and a little and a little, like anger leaving a good heart. He woke her at last. "The water has gone polite," he said. Emeline listened at the door and smiled in the dark. "Load," she said. "Last leg." 8 miles were left, and 3 hours to do them in, with the last water still to cross. The Clapper Bridge at Hagslack had stood over the burn for 400 years. Great grey slabs on dry stone piers, older than the parish, older than the road. The lanterns found the piers still standing. The slabs were gone. Emeline stood at the brink with the light held high. The burn ran below her, fast and full and cold, ripped white where the fallen slabs broke it. The thaw-burst had run down, as she had promised. This was the burn being polite. Polite was still 40 feet of water that would drown a laden pony. She did not waste 1 minute on the bridge that was not there. She was already at the banks, both of them, with the light. Loads over the water, ponies under it, through it at the shallow run there, where it breaks white. Light, a pony can wade that. Laden, never. She was moving as she spoke, unlashing the coil of hemp line that rode always on Mallow's near side, her father's rule, a rope you have never needed yet. We ferry, your grace. My father did it here in the year 12 when the first slab cracked. The near pier is still standing, and it will take a round turn of the heavy line. The rock horn yonder takes the far end. His travelling block runs on the line, and every pack in the string hangs under the block and goes over dry as a bishop, one at a time, on a light hauling tail. It is slow, it is cold, and it works. Tell me my work, said the Duke, without one wasted question. She could have kissed him for it, and noted, somewhere under the cold and the hurry, that she had thought so in exactly those words. Your work is the far anchor. She was cutting a stake sharp with the pack-axe as she said it. There is a rock horn above the shelf there. The heavy line goes round it, and this stake backs it into the rock, and my father's block goes on the line before ever it is made fast. You make all fast by the hitches I call you. Then out of the water and onto the dry shelf above the eddy. You stay on it and haul from there. Cold has your hands off you in 20 minutes. I can stand what you can stand. You will do worse, said Emeline. You will do as you are told with your hands going dead. Go with Mallow. She knows the wade. It is waist deep at the worst of it, and above your belt you have gone wrong. She knotted a light line round his chest and made it fast to the pier. And your grace, he was already at the mare's shoulder, one hand in her mane, and he turned. The carrier and the Duke looked at each other across the little space of trampled bank, lantern to lantern. Where I step, she said, and nowhere else. Down the bank, it holds. Where you step, said the Duke of Harefold, and nowhere else. He said it back to her the way men say an oath, and went down her boot prints into the roaring dark. The water took him to the waist and no further, because she had read the run and she was right. He made all fast behind the rock horn as she called the hitches over, and climbed out onto the dry shelf above the eddy with the hauling tail in his hand. She took a round turn on the standing pier and hauled the line taut over the water. It rose dripping out of the dark like a single harp string. The first thing over was not a pack. She hung the express pouch under her father's travelling block herself and sent it. Everything in the world that could save her brother went out over 40 feet of white water on a rope and came down dry. Kenelm held it up with the seal turned out, so she could see across the water that it was unbroken, and set it on the rock at his feet, and did not put it in his coat. Then the packs began, hanging under the block, swaying, while the flood ran white a yard beneath them. Halfway over, it stalled against the sag of the line. She paid and flicked and worked it on, her arms singing. On the far bank, Kenelm hauled the tail hand over hand from the shelf with the wet hemp cutting his palms. The pack came down dry on the far stones, and out over the water, ragged and breathless, came a sound the tops had never heard before. The Duke of Harefold, laughing at the top of his lungs at 5 in the morning in a flooded burn, with his hands on fire, because a bag of the king's mail had just flown over a drowned river on a piece of string, and it had worked. It had worked. She had thrown a road across the flood out of 2 stakes and a rope. 1 load, Emeline shouted across the water, and could not keep the grin out of her own voice. 7 more. The ponies she sent between loads, unladen, light on their feet, down her boot prints, into the wade at the white break. Mallow first to show the young ones it could be done, the string breasting the shallows one by one, with the Duke's low, steady voice calling them on to the far bank. The brown sisters went over one behind the other, and neither took the bank till the other was in the shallows beside her. He had learned, somewhere in that night, the tone you use, the firebank tone. 7 ponies took a stranger's word for it in the dark. The trouble came with the mail packs near the end. Gimlet's second bag went out heavy. Midway the loop fouled, twisted on itself where the line had frayed against the far stake, and stuck fast, the king's mail hanging over the middle of the flood, swinging, going nowhere. "It is fouled at your stake," Emeline called. "Level, level, you keep your voice level or you lose the far bank's hands. Take a turn on the horn and hold it, right hand, left hand only. Follow the line up from the block to the stake head. There is a twist riding on the fray. Push it up and over the stake top. Up first, then over. Your right hand does not move. Your right hand is England, Kenelm. Up, then over." And on the wet rock above the eddy with the burn tearing past, one-handed, by feel alone with his fingers dead of cold, an anchor obeyed an order he could not see the sense of, from a woman he could not clearly see, exactly as given in the order given, up, then over, and the twist cleared, and the bag ran on and down, and landed dry. And there he stood, doing it, and doing it well, and the thought that went through her with the rope's next pull was not gratitude, and was not respect, though it wore pieces of both. It was simpler, and it was worse. It was, I could keep this one. The sky was the accomplice. As the last pack flew, the storm front that had owned that night went over the eastern edge of the world at last. The sky behind it broke clean, and first light came up the burn gorge gold and sudden, catching the water, the rope, the strong line of dripping ponies. The woman braced black with mud on the near bank, and the man braced on the dry shelf above the eddy with the light full on his ruined laughing face. "7, said Emeline, out loud to the morning, because you count them out loud so that the night cannot argue with you later. 7, said Kenelm from the rock, because he had been counting too. Then it was done. 7 of 7 stood on the Skelbeck bank, shaking the burn off themselves in rainbows of spray. Mallow put her nose against the climbing Duke and shoved him hard up the last of the bank. Emeline came over last through the wade with the line coiled on her shoulder, and walked up the stones to where Kenelm stood wringing the flood out of his sleeves. She put her hand on his wrist, over the rope burns, and did not take it away. The coil on her shoulder was heavy, wet, familiar, her father's weight and her own work together. Nothing was said. The burn ran. The light strengthened. He had worked an hour at the edge of a March flood. The only cold left in him now was the width of her hand, and what he wanted then, plainly and with no credit to himself, was to be kept. 7 ponies, 2 soaked people, the Queen's letters dry under seal in Gimlet's pannier, and both the hearts on that bank going hard and fast, and her hand on his wrist, staying. She stripped his soaked coat off him, buttoned Gimlet's spare round him, and walked him while she did it. "Keep moving till you shake," she said. "The shake is the good sign." "Now," said Emeline at last, hoarse to the gold morning, "we run. 6 miles, 2 hours, the town." Off the tops the land let them go all at once, the way it does on that road. One turn round the shoulder of Hag Slack, and the vale of Skelbeck lay below in the young light, green and flooded silver along the river meadows. The sun came up full behind them, and their own long shadows ran on ahead of them down the road. The string went down the old zigzags at the fastest gate-loaded ponies can honestly keep, and Emeline gave them the downhill her father would have given them. Rein loose, loads checked at every turning, no hurrying the corners. Kenelm rode beside her now, not behind. Somewhere in the night, the order of the road had quietly rearranged itself, and the string accepted it, and so did she. The toll gate on the Skelbeck turnpike stood where it had stood all her life, white bars across the road, and old Waldo the gatekeeper was famous from there to the coast for opening to no one before he had the coin in his hand. He had once kept a bishop waiting in the rain, and was proud of it. The bars were open, wide open, pinned back, and Waldo stood out in the road in his nightshirt and his greatcoat, waving them through with both arms, and roaring. "Seen your lanterns come off the top road an hour since," he bellowed as they poured past. "Braithwaite's string, by God, over the moss in a March thaw. Go on, lass. His Majesty's mail pays no turnpike toll. You're fathered. Go on." And whatever else Waldo shouted was lost behind them. But Emeline had heard the crack in the old man's voice on your father, and carried it down the road with her like a coal carried in cupped hands. At the gatehouse door his wife ran out with her apron full, and pressed on them, without the string so much as halting, 2 loaves still hot from the oven, shoving one up into the Duke's astonished hands, and one into Emeline's, trotting alongside them. "Your father carried my letters 30 year, lass, 30 year, and never lost a one, and never took his own carrier's penny off a widow at Christmas." She fell back, breathless, calling after them, "Bring your brother home, bring him home." So the news was out. News on that road had always moved faster than any string. The flood had cut the mail, but it had never yet cut the other post, the one that runs kitchen to kitchen, and all down the last miles it ran ahead of them now. A shepherd stood up on the intake wall and pulled off his cap as they passed, and held it to his chest. At Ewesley Lane End, a farm wife had set her children on the wall in a row, and the smallest one saluted, wrong hand gravely. Kenelm, Duke of Harefold, returned that salute with a bow he had last used for the regent, and meant this one. "They are not cheering," he said, wondering. Kenelm had been cheered before, at elections and openings, and had learned what cheering was worth. "No," said Emeline. Her eyes were fixed down the vale, where the smoke of the town was rising straight in the morning stillness. "They know where we are going. You do not cheer a thing until it is done. They are wishing." Her voice came a little rough. "That is the county on that wall, your grace. Every soul my father ever carried a letter to." And then, small and far and clean across the flooded meadows, the bells of Skelbeck began to count, and the string heard it, ears all going forward together, and Emeline counted with them, lips moving. 7. 7 o'clock, and the town only just getting out of its beds, and the last mile of the Vale Road running silver wet, empty before them into the streets. Above the huddle of roofs, on the rise beyond the marketplace, one built thing stood up thin and black against the morning sky. In all that lovely country it had no other purpose on God's earth than the killing of one man at 8. Around its foot, already, the crowd lay gathered, dark and quiet. Emeline looked at it once. Then she leaned down over Mallow's neck, this mare who had carried the line all night and had a right to be asked and not told, and said quietly, privately, between the two of them, "One more mile, old lady, for Zachary." Mallow laid her ears back and went. Emeline felt the surge come up through her own body, the mare's yes becoming her own. It was the only way she had ever been able to ask for help. Emeline felt the crowd before she reached it, hundreds of people being very still together, a stillness with a hunger in it, packed black around the scaffold and up the jail rise. It was 20 minutes to 8. "Mail!" she called, the old cry, her father's cry. The crowd at a hanging may not part for a duke, but a mail cry off the moor road with 7 steaming ponies behind it opened that crowd, and they came up the rise through a channel of turned faces. The whisper ran outward from them faster than they rode, her name in it, and her father's, and one word over and over, "Pardon, pardon." At the prison gate stood the under-sheriff in his black watch in hand, the chaplain beside him, the hangman back by the steps with his coiled rope. The under-sheriff was a careful man at the end of a careful life. Emeline had Gimlet's near pannier open before the string had fully halted, and the pony stood without moving a foot while she worked the buckle. She put the express pouch into Kenelm's hands with the seal unbroken on the throat of it. "Yours to present," she said, "mine to answer for. Sir, a free pardon for Zachary Braithwaite, granted by the Prince Regent in the King's name, signed at Carlton House on Friday evening." The under-sheriff took the pouch and turned it once. The oilskin was scoured black with peat, and the man holding it out was hatless, mud to the eyebrows, and claiming to be a duke. "Sir," said the under-sheriff, and it cost him, "a royal dispatch comes to me by a king's messenger. This has come by a substitute. Before I stay in execution, I must be satisfied of two things, out loud, that the substitution was lawfully made, and that the custody of this packet has not been broken between the seal and my hand." His voice, careful to the end, nearly did not manage the rest. "I cannot stay a-hanging on a stranger's word, though the stranger be a duke." "Then take mine." Emeline had come down off Mallow, and came forward through the ringing quiet, black with the moss to her shoulders. She was not a stranger, and every soul on that rise knew it. She felt her father's voice come up out of her chest and not her throat, low from the rope pull, the wading, the 16 hours. "Emeline Braithwaite of Ewesley, carrier." Her voice went out over the crowd plain and carrying, built to be heard at the back. "At 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, the Carsbridge postmaster, deputy to the postmaster general, entrusted me with the mail over the moor road as authorized carrier, written, sealed, and entered in his book. His seal is on the bags on that pony and on the throat of that pouch, and his hand is in his book, and both will answer for me." She pointed, and 300 heads turned to Gimlet. "The substitution is his, sir, and it is written. He entered that pouch apart, under its own hour and its own number. He gave it to me and not to his grace, and his grace has carried nothing all night but the receipt for it. Ask him for it and set it against the book. That pouch has ridden under that seal, in my charge, since 3:30 yesterday. I will say it's every hour, and you may check the seal against every word. 3:30, the yard at Ewesley, sealed apart from the mail in my sight, signed for by me. The low ford at 5, over dry in Gimlet's near pannier under my own hand. The bait at Swinner Gill, 8 till 10. Mrs. Holroyd will swear that pouch never came out of that pannier, nor out of my sight. The long moss by 3, and it crossed the bog on my line and my father's stakes. The burn at Hag Slack at first light. The bridge is down, sir, and we ferried over on a stretched line under my father's block, and that pouch went first of all, on my rope, in front of my eyes, while his grace held the far anchor. And this rise at 20 minutes to 8. She stood straight as the stake line. 16 hours, and I can name the ground under that pouch for every one of them. That is the chain, sir, sworn on my father's name and the king's seal together. The water touched the cover. The water never touched the charge." Silence. The under-sheriff looked at the carrier, and at the sealed pouch in his own hand, and at his watch. What turned him at last was not rank, and not pity, but her. The law wants a rail to run on. Emeline Braithwaite had laid one across the roof of the county in the dark. The law ran on it from the gate to the cell door. "Break that seal," he said to the chaplain, "and hold it up as you do, so the rise can see it was whole." And his pen was already moving in his book. At 7:43, packet received under postal seal, course and custody attested before witnesses by the carrier. The wallet came out of the pouch dry, and 3 papers came out of the wallet, and the under-sheriff named them as he laid them on the gate ledge, because 300 people are entitled to know what is read to them. A confession sworn before a magistrate, saying who robbed the Skelbeck mail and that it was not this boy. A letter of the Queen's, saying why the mercy was asked. The third was the warrant, ordering him discharged out of custody. He turned the warrant to the light and studied the sign manual, the seal, the countersignature of the Secretary of State, and then looked past the Duke at the hangman. "Take that down." Then he read the operative line first, in the flat voice a careful man keeps for the only thing that matters. "Our will and pleasure, therefore, is that you cause Zachary Braithwaite to be forthwith discharged out of custody, and for so doing this shall be your warrant." Then the Duke said, at the gate, that the county should hear why. So, over the held-breath crowd went the words of an old woman written in her own upstroke hand. "It is not the Crown's dignity that is served by the death of a wronged boy, but only its haste. And mercy, sir, has never yet lamed the law, though the law has often enough lamed mercy. His mother being dead, I ask it in her stead. Charlotte R. The Queen's letters went out at last into the morning air of a market town, in a careful man's steady voice. Emeline Braithwaite stood on the cobbles with her hand wound into Mallow's wet mane, and heard the words she had carried over the roof of the county under seal, and never once read. What a crowd of 300 does at such a moment is not a cheer. It is a sound like the hillside letting out one breath it had been holding since midnight. Emeline heard it, and her own breath went with it, out, all the way out, and inside that sound, small things, enormous things, the hangman coiling his rope and walking home with his eyes down, an old shepherd taking off his hat, and then every hat on the rise coming off, hundreds, not for a death, for the thing nobody there had ever once seen beat the bell. They brought Zachary out at 8:05, blinking in the light in his shirt, a tall boy gone thin and white with 11 days of the condemned cell, his hands already free, and his first step off the threshold went not to the Duke, nor the paper, nor the crowd. It went, stumbling, breaking to a run, to his sister. They stood in the middle of 300 people holding on to each other, the carrier and the wheelwright's boy, mud and prison pallor. He was lighter than she remembered. She held him harder, as if to press the weight back into him. She got the pocket open and gave him back his note out of the cell. Do not come to Skelbeck, with her father's hazel tally beside it. I never came to watch, she said. I came to stop it. They said nothing else you could print. The crowd around them wept comfortably, and did not mind who saw. Then he lifted his head and went past the Duke and the paper to mop it, still black to the hip with the bog, and put both hands flat on her neck. Her gall healed in the autumn, said Emeline. He could not answer that. 300 people on the rise watched a boy who had been going to hang say good morning to a pony. The hats that had come off did not go back on. She turned her head against her brother's shoulder. She had not looked at Kenelm since the prison gate, and had not known she was avoiding it. Kenelm stepped up onto the jail steps, where every eye could find him, wreck that he was. He turned square to Emeline and Zachary Braithwaite. He took off the hat he was not wearing. His hand went to it and found nothing. He bowed instead, deep, and stayed down a full breath. He said it in the voice he had been trained from boyhood to lay across a shire. I signed a boy over to the assizes because I would not stop and hear his sister. The mail came over the tops on 7 ponies to undo my signature. He let it stand. The crowd waited for a sophomin clause, understood that it was not coming, and went quiet to its bones. Miss Braithwaite asked me one question 11 days ago, and it had one honest answer, and a man in my seat owes the county his stopping. I did not stop. He turned then to the boy. Zachary Braithwaite, your name is clean. It was never anything else. What was dirty, this county has watched your sister wash all night. Kenelm came down the steps, and before 300 witnesses, the 14th Duke of Harefold gave the carrier of the Ewesley string his hand, not took hers, gave his, palm up and open, and waited. Her hand was still wound in Mallow's mane. She looked at it, rope burned, peat black, the cracks still raw from the salve. Then she opened her hand and let the mane go. Then she put her hand in his. 8 o'clock struck over Skelbeck, every bell in the town, and nobody died. They put up at the Swan, because 7 ponies had earned their corn, and 2 humans had earned dry clothes, and because there was business that would not wait even for sleep. It was done in the Swan's best parlour that same afternoon, before witnesses, in ink. The under-sheriff came, and the Carsbridge postmaster's letter came by the first rider over the reopening South Road, and Kenelm had the Swan's landlord in to witness because, he said, a thing was better witnessed by a man who would gossip about it accurately. I will set my hand to it, said the under-sheriff, and gladly. Emeline sat at the table with a pen and read every line before she signed, as her father had taught her to read anything with her name near it, and this is what she signed. The Carsbridge postmaster's letter extended her emergency authority over the moor route until the district surveyor should come and rule on it. It recorded the carriage of that night as performed, the mails delivered entire. Kenelm did not grant her the mails, because the mails were not his to let, and he said so before he took the pen up. What he signed was his recommendation to the post office that the route be contracted to Emeline Braithwaite of Ewesley, in her own name, at the proper rate, and under it a plain statement of how the charge against her brother was got up and whose signature carried it. The mail string's freedom from toll at the Skelbeck gate was set down in the same hand. That freedom had been the statute's own these 30 years, but Kenelm would have it written out plain anyway. And Messrs. Harding of Skelbeck, wheelwrights, recorded themselves happy, more than happy, to reopen the apprenticeship of Zachary Braithwaite. No time lost, articles as before, which Kenelm had guaranteed and did not need to. All of it before he asked her for anything. She noticed that. She was meant to notice it. It was the grammar of the man's amends, the papers first, her name made good first, her brother's trade first, every promise made good in her hands, with witnesses, so that nothing that came after could ever be mistaken, by her or by the county, for a price. "There is one thing more," said Kenelm, when the ink was sanded, "and it is not business, and I find I cannot ask it in a parlour." "Where then?" said Emeline. "Where I was taught what asking is," Kenelm said, "and before whom?" The square had not emptied. The scaffold was already coming down. The carpenters had been sent up within the hour. Half the crowd had stayed to watch the good demolition, and the other half because it was the sort of day nobody wanted to be first to leave. So there was a crowd, and it was the same crowd, when the Duke of Harefold walked back out into the middle of the market square of Skelbeck, dressed dry, but not one whit grander. He stopped by the head of a black pack mare with a small white star, and said in the shyer voice, so that no one need strain, "Miss Braithwaite, I have a question for you, and this county heard the last question between us go unanswered, so it may as well hear this one honestly asked." The square went quiet, the way the moss went quiet. "I mean to ask you to marry me," he said, and paused very slightly while Skelbeck privately fell over. "And I'm not going to ask it today, because you have known me one night and a morning, and the man you met yesterday noon does not deserve you, and the man who stood in your river this morning has not yet earned the asking. What I ask is leave to court you, Emeline Braithwaite, openly, at your pace, on your road, on your terms, your work yours, your name yours, your string yours, and I to fit myself round them, and not once, ever, the other way about." Kenelm took a breath, and the last of it he did not say to the crowd at all. His voice came down off the shire register and was just a man's. "You told me hope was the only free thing on your road. I am asking to earn mine. May I?" Emeline Braithwaite stood in the market square with her brother at her shoulder, and her mare's breath in her hair, 20 hours awake, and looked at this wreck of a duke a long moment. Mallow's breath was warm and steady, the same at every stake, every crossing, every hour of the night. She let it hold her up while she looked. "On terms," she said. Her voice came out level, but her legs were shaking now, the long descent off the moor catching up with her at last. "Name them. You caught me on the road, not off it. If you want the carrier you ride with the string, rain and all, loads and all, Mondays and all." She let it hang. "And before May, your grace, you will learn to load a pack-frame square, because I have seen your corners, and I am not having it said the Ewesley mail rides crooked on any side." She felt it rising in her chest, the laugh, the same one that had cracked out over seed cake in the dark. She held it, but her mouth betrayed her, the corner of it lifting. The crowd of Skelbeck Market Square made, as one body, a sound that was half a roar and half a laugh, with the roar winning, and hats went up this time, 100 of them, wheeling in the sun. The carpenters on the half-stripped scaffold hammered their mallets on the rail. Waldo's wife, who had walked in for the pleasure of it, seized the under-sheriff himself and shook him by both hands, and Zachary Braithwaite laughed for the first time in 11 days, a great cracked whoop of a laugh, and thumped the Duke of Harefold between the shoulders hard enough to stagger him. "She'll work you like a gelding," said Zachary with joy. "I sincerely hope so," said the Duke, and Mallow, 14 hands of opinion, who had carried the line all night and watched every word of it with her ears, chose that moment to shove her whole head into Kenelm's chest and hold it there. The county could witness what it liked. That was the one that mattered. Emeline felt her own eyes burn and did not know if it was the laugh finally winning or something else. May came up the moor road green, early and all at once. The district surveyor had ridden the route himself in April, in the rain, at her pace, and the contract was ratified from the first Monday in May, in her own name. The assize record could not be unwritten. It was annotated instead with the sworn confession and the royal pardon, and nobody in that county thereafter called Zachary Braithwaite guilty. On the first Monday of the contract, the Ewesley string took the mail north in sunshine. 7 ponies, fat and shining, loads high and even, Zachary Braithwaite whistling on the offside with his wheelwright's hands brown again. At the head of the line rode the carrier of His Majesty's moor mail, contracted and sealed and printed in the county paper. The same waxcloth wallet that had once crossed a flood in a duke's coat rode on gimlet, carrying the county's ordinary Monday. 2 wills, a bill of sale, 11 letters from sons and daughters gone south, and one in a fine strong hand to Mrs. Holroyd, Swinner Gill, suspected of containing a receipt for orange marmalade from the kitchens of Harefold itself. And on the near side, on a sturdy cob bought honestly for the work, Ash having gone back under his packs, rode the Duke of Harefold in a plain riding coat, loading done, Corners Square. "Corners Square, Your Grace," said Zachary and whistled on. It had not been quick, the corners. Through the spring the 14th Duke had stood in his shirt sleeves in the Ewesley yard, folding canvas under the eye of a carrier who accepted from him what she accepted from the weather, which was no excuses, and doing it again, and doing it again. Mrs. Holroyd, when the string baited at Swinner Gill this morning, had walked round his lashings with her hands behind her back like an admiral at inspection, tugged 2 wanties, sniffed, and delivered the verdict of the road. "They'll ride." A pause at the door, not looking round. Tom would have said the same, which sent Emeline out to the stable very suddenly to see about a thing that did not need seeing about, and everyone in the baithouse kitchen had the grace to study their tea. They came up onto the tops at noon, the roof of the county green and running with larks, and where the track passed the south end of the long moss, Emeline halted the string, as she did now every crossing, for one particular minute. The new stake line stood out bright across the moss. 41 posts in all, 31 of them fresh-cut hazel, set in over 3 clear April days by the carrier and her brother and a duke who had asked to learn the setting of them, and her father's 10 greying at the south end among them, finishing at last the line they had started. The old notched tally hung home again on its nail by the stable door in Ewesley, retired. The moss lay flat and green and patient in the sun. It would outweight them all, and it had gone hungry a year, and it could go hungry forever. "Walk on," said Emeline, and the line went over, caught clean every step, 7 ponies and 3 riders on trodden ground, where she stepped and nowhere else. On the far edge, with Skelbeck Vale opening green and gold below them, and the road home lying easy in the afternoon, Kenelm brought his cob up beside Mallow. He rode a while in the great grass silence, and then said conversationally, "I have now been courting you, by my count, 1 month and 11 days. On your road, in the rain, Mondays included, my corners are square. Your brother has stopped calling me Your Grace except to be impertinent. Mrs. Holroyd sends my coat marmalade." Kenelm looked straight ahead at the road. I am aware there is a proper order to things, and I have learned to love the proper order of things from a woman who will not let a pack ride crooked half a mile. So I am asking after the schedule, madam, purely for the planning of the route. That question I have been carrying since the shooting hut. Is there a date fixed for the asking of it? Emeline Braithwaite looked down the long green miles of her own contracted road, at her brother whistling behind, at her string moving as one through the light, at everything her one night had brought back. And then she looked over at the man on the cob, burned brown now, rope-scarred hands quiet on the rein, watching her the way he had watched her over a fire in March, hope held out steady on an open palm, asking leave. Now, she said. Kenelm was very still for a moment. Now? Now, said Emeline. So they both got down, there in the middle of the mail round, on the roof of the county. She closed the last of the distance herself. He put his two rope-scarred hands on her face. She leaned into him and kissed him at last, with the sun on them, her hands full of his ruined collar, and no clock left anywhere in the world to hurry it. Then Kenelm asked her, in the plain words a man uses when every grander word has been worn off him by weather and rope and a good woman's patience. Marry me, Emeline Braithwaite, on your road. I will keep to it. On articles, said Emeline, drawn with trustees before the wedding, so the string and the road and the earnings stay mine, to my separate use, with you signing to keep off them. Drawn tomorrow, said Kenelm. Yes, said Emeline, which was the plainest word of all, and the only witnesses were 7 ponies, a whistling brother who whooped once and startled the larks, and the road itself, her father's road, her road now, running on north ahead of them, stake to stake to stake, all the way home. The string walked on. The mail, as it happened, arrived early,